Hey, what's up guys? My name is Tom Spark. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be reviewing the new Star Wars game, and I'm going to give you my thoughts about it. So guys, I'm going to be running this down in a list of pros and cons. So first, let's start with the pros. So this is a very modern looking game. There's really good particle effects, and especially what stood out to me is the animations. Animations are very strong when you're moving with a lightsaber, slashing about, and there's some pretty cool movements you can unlock that really do kind of make you feel like a Jedi. Movement also feels pretty good by dodging and flipping and sprinting around. Overall movement just feels pretty polished, and levels can feel fun to explore, running around on walls, jumping up, and stuff like that. However, I do think there is a little bit of a missed opportunity in some of the movement mechanics, whereas something like Jedi Knight Star Wars Academy had a little bit more variety in how you can move. You could run up walls, you could do backflips, you could force jump even higher. Overall, I think the limitations in this game in terms of level design kind of restrict how movement feels, and you don't quite feel like a super limber Jedi because sometimes you're really kind of limited by how the game designed the levels and the restrictions around it. Another pro is that this game is Star Wars. Honestly, if this game didn't have the Star Wars theme to it, I honestly think it would not be getting as much hype. It seems like the game would be just kind of a cookie cutter Dark Souls clone. That's at least what it would be dubbed if it didn't have this kind of cool Star Wars theme. The game also runs pretty good at 4K, and it almost gets near 60 FPS around some of the top end graphics cards. You might have to fiddle a little bit between epic and high, but the game does feel pretty well optimized, and overall the polish here is quite good as well. There's not really any bugs or anything like that. The only thing you're going to have to really contend with is some long load times, but even that seems to be fixed in a recent patch. Unfortunately, this game has more cons than pros. The graphic style I think is a bit weak and washed out. The Unreal Engine here that they used feels a little bit too blurry to me and a little bit too pastel-y, if that makes sense. If you're familiar with that MOBA called Paragon, I would say that the visual style is very similar. Everything looks pretty cool, and there are some good lighting and particle effects and stuff like that. However, the art style here just feels a little bit drab. Not only that, but the main character's kind of face also looks a little bit funny, a little bit Disney-esque. Not really sure why he looks funny, he just kind of does, but that's something that kind of bothered me throughout the game. Some other characters too also look a little bit weird. The alien though looks really good, and some of the ships and planets and stuff like that can look quite good, but there's nothing that ever made me go, wow, compared to something like God of War, which just oozed artistic brilliance at every step of the game, stuff that could be in paintings. This game just kind of looks like, oh yeah, it looks pretty good. Combat here feels a little bit too simple in my opinion. You have some basic attacks and a stronger attacks, and you could kind of mix them together, kind of similar to something like Dark Souls, but I think without some of the complexity. Honestly, I kind of wish that they had gone a little bit away from this Dark Souls model and kind of put something more in it to let you have more force abilities and stuff to play around with. You have some basic stuff that you unlock, and I don't want to spoil too much, but it's mostly just kind of like basic Jedi powers, kind of like a low tier Jedi. There's nothing super interesting here, not any crazy cool powers. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you really want to live out the Jedi fantasy, it might not be the best game to do so. The story here is also very Disney grade with a lot of campy, witty alien speak, and if you're familiar with the Marvel movies or tired of them, you might not like this very much. There's a lot of kind of cute moments in the game, and the story, in my opinion, doesn't really take too many risks. Stormtroopers can't be cut in half, for example, although you can cut in half aliens and robots, but everything here just feels kind of boring, in my opinion. The main character doesn't feel super important or lower based, and the whole story just kind of feels like a weird fan fiction spin-off. Who's really asking for a game in between the Clone Wars and the old movies? Honestly, I would prefer something after, the Return of the Jedi, or maybe even something before some of the first movies like The Phantom Menace. This kind of period, while it's not super explored, it just feels like not that important or that interesting because it's like, all that Jedi just getting hunted down or whatever. Levels and the puzzles in this game can either feel too simple or too annoying, and the complexity is kind of not really quite there. Take, for example, a game like Tomb Raider. There's like 6 or 7 steps to the puzzles, and each step is pretty easy to figure out, but the entire puzzle can take some time and thinking, but you're never really that stuck. A game like this really only has 2 steps to most puzzles, but often the solution is kind of hidden due to some kind of user interface thing, or you can't see so that something's glowing, or the solution to the puzzle is just not that obvious, even though it's not that complex or fun. I have found a lot of the puzzles in this game extremely aggravating, and then once I found out the solution, I was like, well, duh, why didn't I see that, or why didn't I notice that? It's something like a missed switch, or just something you didn't move all the way. That's kind of what this game feels like in the puzzles, and I've seen other people complain about the same thing. In this game, I also find that one of the most annoying things is that the difficulty is either too hard or too easy. There's not really a happy medium, and I had the same problem with the God of War game, however, it's even worse here. If you take the easiest mode, which is story mode, you could pretty much kill everything and nothing does damage to you, and even the monsters will sometimes pause to just kind of stare at you and not even move. However, bump it up to one difficulty up, which is the Jedi Knight mode, which is supposed to be kind of like the easy mode, everything becomes increasingly hard, and monsters will not only they won't just stand there anymore. They'll knock you down and throw you around all over the place. You bump it up another mode, and it's pretty much going to be exactly like Dark Souls or Sekiro. Bump it up another mode, and it's for the masochists out there. However, I would have wished there to be a difficulty mode where things feel difficult but not overly punishing. I would like a difficulty mode between Jedi Knight and the story mode, because story mode's too easy. Jedi Knight mode is too hard. I think that's a problem with these kind of games, and that the difficulty modes are hard to balance, which is one reason people have always argued for Dark Souls and Sekiro type games to only have one difficulty, because that's the best way to balance it. Now that we have multiple difficulties, I kind of see these people point, because when you're playing on story mode, the game just feels kind of boring because the story isn't that good. And when you're playing on Jedi Knight mode, and if you're not someone with a ton of patience or someone who doesn't mind backtracking a lot, you're also going to get bored that way as well.
PS1 game? Nah, I like Dreamcast. Oh, does that mean I lost all my souls?
So there's no really happy medium here or way to be satisfied if you're someone like me who doesn't really like the intensity and patience required for Souls games, but you also like a little bit of challenge and don't want to face roll everything. Not really a difficulty for this kind of person, I don't think. Now, cosmetic upgrades and treasures in this game are very, very boring as well. Every time you open a box, you might find a new state of poncho. There's a couple different colors and stuff like that. And you might find a slightly different lightsaber hilt. Besides that, it's not like you're getting that much cool stuff early on. And the cosmetics and treasures in this game kind of just feel like kind of annoying. Honestly, it seems like this game was supposed to have some sort of cosmetic shop, and it just got pulled or something because they were scared people were going to flip out. Which they would have, because this is EA, but regardless, it still feels like this part of the game is a little bit lacking. Honestly, guys, I'm kind of disappointed in this Star Wars game, but I'm not really that surprised. I don't think this is a bad game necessarily. I think it's a fine game if you really like challenging games in terms of the combat and boss mechanics. However, if you're not someone who likes these kind of Dark Souls games, there's not really that much to draw you here. Cosmetic progression is really weak. The story isn't anything special. And even the graphical kind of fidelity of the game and art style isn't anything that excellent. It just kind of feels like a run-of-the-mill kind of game that blends a couple elements from some successful games like God of War, something like Dark Souls, and maybe even some other Metroidvanias. It's an okay game, but not that good of a Star Wars game in my opinion, and not really a game I even want to finish. I only played around 10 hours or so and couldn't really get any further in the game, so that's just my thoughts. That might just be me though. Let me know down in the comments down below what you think of this game, and I'll see you again very soon.